Yo, what is up guys and gals? Welcome back to another chess video. This is me, JK Jax, back at it again. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to play the Vienna part 4. So in the previous part of the Vienna, I've talked about the d6 line after bishop c5. But in today's video, we're covering castles and the knight a4 and bishop b4. Alright, let's get started. So, of course, we will play our thematic pawn move, pawn to f4. As I mentioned in the previous video, this is why we play the move pawn to f4. Here, black will castle. Against castling, we will play the move knight to f3, so developing as per normal. And here there is a move that you need to remember. All the other moves lead to wins for white, but this move in particular scores the best against white. The move will be knight to g4. The idea is that black wants to jump his knight into f2 and fork the queen and the rook. Here, I recommend the move queen to e2. And you may think to yourself, Jack, why did you just let your opponent give you a free check and now your king can't castle anymore? Well, bishop f2, king to f1. We are now threatening to play the move pawn to h3 and win the knight. Also in the future, we have ideas to block the light square bishop away from the defense of the knight. Remember the move pawn to f5, right? You want to lock the bishop out of the entire game. So here, black will play the move knight to d4. It's one of the only moves in the position to free his bishop and allow him to escape. Here we will have to trade the knights, otherwise you're going to be losing a lot of material. Bishop takes d4, and now we are going to play the move pawn to f5. Our thematic pawn idea. Hey, Future Jack here. I forgot to include this in the video. My bad guys, but I'm here to explain why you don't take the free knight. This knight on g4 is seemingly free. However, if you take the knight, the opponent will have the move pawn to d5, which attacks your light square bishop and also opens up the opponent's light square bishop onto your queen. And after you save your queen, for example f5, which blocks the attack on the queen, you unfortunately have to give up your very strong light square bishop and suffer some sort of pawn weakness. As you can see here, if you take this pawn, now you have more split pawns and more weaknesses in the position. Split pawns is usually not good news because it's easily targetable. It's like your friends, you know, staying far away, or like a long distance relationship. It wouldn't be as strong as if the relationship is quite close to each other. So that's why if you want to maintain a healthy pawn structure, then I'd suggest ignore this hanging knight and instead play a move like f5 that helps your position. Here black will have to play knight to f2, the only move in the entire position. So after knight to f2, we will play this mysterious but interesting move. We're going to be sacrificing the rook! Queen to h5. What does this move even do? It's not very clear yet, but in the future, you'll see the reason why we play the move queen to h5. Now, the idea is if black were to take our rook on h1, then we will play the move bishop to g5. So after bishop to g5, the queen will only have one move to save himself, which is the move queen to e8. And here, we will play the move that ends everything, knight to d5. Here we target the pawn on c7, which attacks the rook and the queen. So if, for example, the opponent goes queen to e6, here you can take the pawn, but there's an even better move, knight to e7. Discovered check on the queen. And here, black is completely lost. So black cannot take the knight at all, simply because of bishop to g5. Here, black will have to play the only move in the entire position, which is c6. This move draws the game for black, but it's still a very crushing attack for white. Here, we are still going to go for our idea, bishop to g5. Yet again, here, black cannot take the rook. Here black will have to play the move queen to b6, which escapes all the way from all sorts of attacks against the king and the queen, and the queen also counters attack the very weak pawn on d2. Here we have one move to defend both the pawn and our knight as well, which is the move knight to a4. And here the queen will have to save itself, queen to a5. Most people in chess will think, hey, my piece is under attack, I should defend. But have you guys considered counter-attacking? c3. So we're gonna counter-attack this bishop instead, because remember, the knight on the rim is dim, which basically means that your knight on the edge sees less squares in the opponent's territory, which makes it a worse piece than the very strong opponent dark square bishop, which also defends the knight on f2. So we want this trade to happen. So takes, and of course black's best move in the position is to take the rook. But after a move like f6, the position is still pretty much drawn. However, the game is much more sharper for black, which means that if black messes up just one time, the game is pretty much over for black. So black has to play very accurately just to survive. So the only move by black here is the move d5, but I won't go too much into theory. This is the key position you need to remember. Just remember that if the opponent takes your pawn here, then you can simply play the move bishop takes f6, followed by queen g5, and checkmate is inevitable. So that will be it against castling. That's pretty much all you need to remember. Any other moves other than knight to g4 wouldn't be very ideal. And if opponent here plays the move pawn to d6, this leads back to the previous video I've shown to you, where you can simply play the move pawn to f5, locking out the light square bishop away from the game, and you just play whatever I told you from the previous part. So that will be it for castles and the whole of bishop c5. Now let's move on to the next variation. Let's cover bishop to b4 first. Against bishop b4, we want to play the move knight to e2. Why? Well, we don't want our pawn structure to be destroyed, okay? Like my face, you don't want to have too much acne. So you want to patch it up with some skincare, and knight e2 is the skincare. The pimple and the dirt is the bishop d4. So you want to patch up all the holes in your skin. So here, our idea is, of course, if the bishop takes the knight, you can recapture back with the knight, and your grip on the center is still really strong. So here, our idea is that if the opponent plays anything but the move pawn to d5, we will simply castle, and we will play again our thematic pawn idea f4. We want to open up the f file, and instead of going for a kingside pawn storm, now we have pieces that are actually able to join the attack. Now the only move here to sort of equalize the game is the move pawn to d5. So we simply take the pawn in the center. After the knight takes the pawn, we will castle, and again we are still aiming for the move pawn to f4. They will take on c3 with the knight. You simply recapture back with the pawn. The bishop slides back to a more defensive position, and here you play the move pawn to a4. We have two ideas with this move. Number one is to play a5 and try to restrict counterplay on the queen side, and secondly, we will pair it up with the move f4. This is our thematic pawn break, okay? We have to play f4 in almost every single position to open up our bishop and our rook. So if you don't want your pieces to be a sitting duck or a dead piece, play the move f4, okay? And here's the thing, if white gets a single open file or a single open diagonal, black will be steamrolled.
For example, if they take the pawn, you can take the pawn, or you can ignore and play d4, which stops the knight from jumping to e5 and harassing your bishop. And the next turn, you'll recapture back the pawn with the knight, placing a knight on a more active square. And in the future, you're gonna take the pawn, then you're gonna play queen h5, which paired up with the bishop, you'll slide back the bishop at some point. Aiming against the king is a devastating attack, followed with your bishop and this very well placed knight on f4. The attack is pretty much unstoppable.
And the last part of this video will be what happens if the opponent attacks your light square bishop, which is one of the strongest pieces in the position. because the light square bishop is one of the key attacking pieces that helps you to start attacks. This is where you get the fire from. But unfortunately, in this position, there is no way to save Private Ryan. You have to let him die. Too bad. So instead, you gotta patch the pimple, play again, knight e2. This also supports your f4 pawn push, although that would not be your main idea. In this position, you have to play a little bit more positionally. You have to play moves like b3. You have to play moves like bishop to g5 and moves like queen to d3 at some point in time. For example, the opponent will probably play bishop to c5 or takes the knight. What if the opponent develops his bishop? Against this move, I would like you to either castle or play h3. Depending on your play style, I think castling would always be objectively the more better choice compared to h3, simply because with this move, you put your rook on a very active f-file, and in the future, you can play h3 at any moment in time. You're in no rush. But both moves are completely fine here. Over here, black would castle, and after a move like knight to g3, your ideas will be as follows. In the future, the opponent will definitely take away your light square bishop. But for example, in this position, knight takes, pawn takes, and d6. Here you play the move pawn to b3. So your first idea is to first reinforce your pawn structure. Secondly, you want to play the move queen to d3 to defend everything. And last but not least, you can develop your bishop to b2 where it defends the knight. And then in the future, you can play king h1 and go for your f4 pawn break. So that will be the general plan, as well as h3, to stop the opponent from doing funny business on g4. So that will be it against bishop to c5. The last variation, finally we are almost there, of this variation is what happens if they take away your light square bishop. Against this move, of course you have to recapture back. And what if the opponent decides to pin your knight to the king? Here you don't have to worry as much, because already remember from the last variation I showed you, patch the pimple, knight e2. So here you just continue with your development, similar to the last variation I've talked about, queen to d3 once again, and your ideas will include bishop g5, castling queen side, and go for your king side pawn storm. And that will be for all the variations of the Vienna part 4. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know down in the comments below what can I improve on, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.